Welcome to the Page One Podcast, a podcast featuring a variety of guests and thought leaders on topics ranging from digital marketing, sales channel strategies, influencer marketing, best-in-class product launches, and all the details about how to accelerate sales. Now, here's your host, Luke Peters.
Thanks for joining us on the Page One Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Peters, CEO of Newer Appliances and Retail Band Digital Strategy Agency. We're now in a coronavirus world. I know that's on everyone's mind, so we're going to adapt these interviews and ask a few questions around how businesses are winning with the coronavirus. This episode is sponsored by Retail Band, where we can give business owners a blueprint on how to grow their digital sales, either direct to consumer or via channels like Home Depot, Wayfair, or Walmart. To learn more, take a look at retailband.com or email me at luke@retailband.com. In this episode, you're going to learn from best-selling author Justin Blaney on the value of influencers, influencer marketing strategies, and we'll talk about his new book, Will Post for Profit. So you're going to learn how to create profitable influencer marketing campaigns in the next 40 minutes or so. Justin Blaney is the best-selling author of 15 books. He's followed by more than 1 million people on Facebook and Instagram at Justin Blaney. He also publishes an app that features his writing, which can be found at justinblaney.com/app. Justin has been using, writing, and speaking about social media since 2006. His course on influencer marketing at the University of Washington Foster School of Business is believed to be one of the first on this topic. Justin, welcome to the Page One Podcast.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Cool. So you're an author, a chief innovation officer at your business, and a professor at the University of Washington. So if you don't mind, if you can just give the audience a little bit more on your background and just describe what you do.
Yeah, thank you. I teach at the University of Washington. I created a class on influencer marketing, and we looked around. I was talking with the dean of Foster Business School, and it didn't appear that there was any classes on the topic at any major university. So we were pretty excited to put something together, put a syllabus together, and that class has been going very well. And I teach at the University of Maryland at the doctoral level. That's where I earned my doctorate about 5 years ago. So I was connected there. Power of networking, that's how you get in the door at universities, is you know somebody. So that's about 1/3 of my professional life. The second third is I'm a chief innovation officer, as you mentioned, the marketing agency, and we do a lot of work with social media. We're generating interest in companies through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and influencers. And so that's where I kind of practice the influencer marketing stuff that I'm teaching at the university. And then the third aspect of my career is I'm a writer, as you also mentioned. And I've written a lot of business books, written a few novels. I have this book, Will Post for Profit, that you mentioned, which is the book that I wrote in conjunction with my work at the University of Washington on the topic. And that's going to be out on October 13th. And we're doing a little pre-order special. That's pretty exciting. And then I have another book coming out in April. I don't advise trying to write and release 2 books in the same 6-month period. It's been pretty hectic, but it's exciting. And so that book is coming out in April. It's called Relationships. And actually, it's a lot about networking and the power of relationships, how you can become more the person you want to be, change your career, change your life, by getting to know and hanging out with the right kinds of people. So that's a bit about me.
Wow. Thanks for that. I love that topic too. And, so you're doing all these different things, Justin. And I want to ask this, is there like a business system, an ERP, or maybe even just a planning process that kind of keeps you glued together, whether in the business or even all 3 aspects of your professional life here? Like
a productivity tool?
Maybe bigger, like, is there like a system, maybe like an ERP or like a business system you use at work, or, maybe it is a productivity tool for, everybody has a different way of kind of keeping themselves organized and on task, or even their businesses, on task.
That's an interesting question. I approach life in business and work maybe a little differently than a lot of people. I don't really see, even though I described it as kind of 3 different parts of my life, I don't really see it that way. I see my whole life integrated, whether I'm hanging out with my girlfriend or whether I'm teaching a class or talking to you on a podcast. It all kind of just feels like life to me. And so people will say that I'm kind of a crazy multitasker and I can switch from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. And so I don't know that I really think about it in terms of having a system, but I do believe very strongly in the power of delegating in every aspect of my life. I delegate everything I possibly can, including keeping track of things in details, because that's something that I can do, but I don't really enjoy it. So I have a lot of assistants and various people in my life that help me keep track. So I guess that's the system, of hiring good people who have a system.
No, that's it. So it sounds like you found successfully how to integrate an assistant, into your life and into your business. So that, I guess that is the right answer.
Yeah, I have a personal assistant. I have assistants in each of my positions, and it all kind of works together. But yeah, absolutely.
Okay. That's awesome. That's a great, nugget there, because I think people are always looking at how to simplify their lives. And I've just listened to a podcast about, really successful business person who then went on to create a consulting business where he helps CEOs, grow their companies actually. But he said, hey, I hate doing a lot of things. I don't want to make reports. I don't want to have, I don't want to even come into a meeting with proposals or any of that. So he really kind of defined what his practice was going to look like. And he does it great, but he doesn't have to do any of the things he doesn't want to do. And I think that's important, once people find some level of success. Cool.
Yeah. Delegation's like magic. It's amazing. You can get something done without having to do it.
There you go.
Sounds like magic to me.
Yep. Love that. Okay. And so how has COVID impacted you professionally?
COVID has changed a lot, of course. In terms of teaching, I did have a term that was going to be in person, and we had to move it online. And that was very difficult for the students and frankly for myself. I've done a lot of online work, but it was different being forced to do it, especially when you were expecting to have that in-person experience. And I think that the students, it was really difficult to keep them engaged and interested. And, in class, I can say, hey, everybody put your laptop down. We're going to have a conversation. And I can make sure I have eye contact with them. And when I do that, we tend to have really rich conversations. But on Zoom, we just couldn't ever get there. And I think in part, it could be that people weren't paying attention, because as far as I know, they're, reading the news instead of listening to the conversation or participating. So that was difficult. But I think, this coming term, and talking with some of the other faculty members, I think that we're going to be able to try to turn a corner on that. With the business online, the social media business, that's been booming during COVID. We help a company do a lot of hiring, and a lot of people lost their jobs, and a lot of people now can work from anywhere. Like, geographic boundaries have been eliminated, at least with one of our key clients. And so we've been able to just open the floodgates and recruit nationwide, when it used to be, they had to live within 30 miles of an office. And so that has been a really big bonus. I mean, the company's up like 30%. So it's kind of a weird situation, because COVID has created winners and losers, and nobody could have predicted ahead of time who was going to be in what group, because we just didn't see this coming. In some ways, some of my aspects of my life are on the winning side from COVID, and some are on the losing side. But yeah, it's really changed a lot in my business life.
Yeah. And well, I can go off on a lot of tangents there, because now you're talking about that you actually help with recruiting, not just digital marketing. But maybe we'll save that for conversation number 2, because I'm so curious about all these things. But I want to focus in on influencers. So let's jump into that, because, for the audience here, influencer marketing is something that people have been talking about. I mean, it's new, but it's been talked about for years here. And I think a lot of business owners haven't jumped on the wagon just because they don't know where to start. There are agencies, and you can hire, A-level influencers, and they're expensive. And I think that can turn people off. And then they can't, always count on that ROI like they might with their other digital spending or their trackability often, because it's kind of a, quasi branding as well. So, and there's many, many other reasons, right, why they haven't jumped into influencer marketing. But listen, you've quote unquote written the book on it. And by the way, for the audience, the book kind of covers if you want to become an influencer, and then also how businesses can work with influencers. So you get it from both sides, which is pretty interesting. So why don't we just start in simple terms? How would you kind of describe the ROI of working with influencers?
Yeah, and before I answer that real quick, one of the interesting things you mentioned, this book is actually for businesses and how to create profitable campaigns, which is, again, something that you mentioned how new this market is. It's new, and it's also been around for, 5, 6, 7 years or more. And yet there still are very few resources out there for businesses on how to do successful influencer marketing. Like, the vast majority of the attention is on how to be an influencer. And so I could understand why maybe your audience might be interested in this, but struggle to know where to begin because well, for one, there's just not a lot of information out there. And two, it's changing so quickly. As soon as something, is working, sometimes people need to change and adapt, and the new, network comes out. Hardly anybody was talking about TikTok this time last year.
Yep.
And now it's one of the biggest networks in the world. That can happen with social media. It's just, you blink your eye and everything changes. So in terms of, getting some practical tips on, how do you get into influencer marketing? Like, what would be a first step that a business owner might take? And one of the things that is important is to work with people who really live and breathe this stuff. And I get a lot of questions from people who, let's say they're 40 years old and they own a clam farm and they want to, get more business with restaurants. And they don't really have social media presence. Maybe they have with friends and family, and they're thinking, I'd like to get on here and, be an influencer. Maybe that'll help me get some business. And that the whole setup of that question tells me that that's probably not going to be a very successful path. Because if that person isn't already living and breathing and loving social media, then the chances that they're going to be able to generate the amount of energy necessary to be successful is very unlikely. Because if they already had the energy for it, they would have been doing it already. And so the same thing is true with businesses. Like, I remember a long time ago when Facebook pages were first coming out, and there were gas stations that created a Facebook page, and then they had on there, where you're pumping your gas, it says, follow us on Facebook or like us on. And I'm thinking, why? Why would anybody do that? Why would I follow this gas station? And the thing that I laugh about in it is it's obviously an idea. Somebody thought, hey, the social media thing's taken off. We got to get on this bandwagon. Let's create a page and let's, try to get some likes. But that decision was made, with a lot of ignorance. It's made there's no planning around it. There's people who are executing and don't really know how to use social media. And so the number one thing that I've found that makes people successful in either being an influencer or working with influencers is that they just live and eat and breathe and just love social media, either from the business side or from the influencer side. And so a business who wants to get involved with influencer marketing, the first thing that they're going to want to do is find someone that really gets social media and work through that person and enable that person. Like we already talked about delegating. So it's about finding those people who are already having that momentum and jumping on with them, because creating it from scratch and by people who have never really done anything in it, it's kind of like me saying hey, I want to be a doctor. And, I just show up at the hospital and in my scrubs and I'm saying, where's the ER room? I'll learn as I go.
Yep.
And it's just not to try to overinflate that it's that difficult or that it requires the training of a doctor in 8 years. It's not so much that. It's more about the language and are you fluent in this kind of medium? And, are you like a fish swimming in water? Is it home to you? Or, are you flapping around on a dry piece of pavement because you're in an environment that you're not very comfortable in?
Yeah, it's a great way to say it. And not everybody, all of our strengths, we're not all going to have the same strengths. So I think it's kind of, trying to fit something round into a square peg type of comment is what you're saying. And if you're not super passionate about influencers, maybe your strengths are elsewhere and maybe they're in delegation so you can hire that person. But not everybody needs to be an influencer. It doesn't mean your business still can't take advantage of it. And the one other thing, Justin, that I would add to it is that when you do this, just like you would anywhere else in your business, when you're building out things, is you got to build out long-term planning. I've seen a lot of people just want to dip their toe in. They want to go just have 10 separate influencer engagements and that's it. But, I always think about the flywheel and that you're building a machine. And so because you're going to improve, you'll make that higher, but then over time, you're going to improve your processes, maybe even over a couple of years. And it's just going to get better and better and better, if you stay engaged. And so that's the one additional thing I would give folks to listen.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So give them something to think about there. So when looking at influencers, right, and people are, again, this is still, I would advocate for, hey, have a plan and have this as an ongoing effort. But, people are always, they're getting hit up by an influencer or they're just one-off opportunities. What are the most important metrics that you look at to understand the value that influencer could bring to a company?
Yeah, to me, metrics are everything. And if you can't measure it, you can't know if you're winning. You can't improve it. you're really inhibited in a way that's catastrophic without proper measurement and analysis of results. So this is one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of people make with influencer marketing. It's just very loosey, goosey, like they pay someone to do something and they just sort of like hope that they got something from it. And to me, that is basically just throwing your money away. So I absolutely want to look at an ROI on my investment, and where I usually start when I'm thinking about ROI. And it depends on the product or service. I understand a lot of your audience is into, you mentioned like hardware and home products. And so with a product, you have a profit in the sale of the product. You also have maybe a lifetime customer value. You might be able to sell some services along with the product. So the first thing I like to try to understand with a lot of customers that I might consult with is, what is the acceptable cost of acquisition that you can pay to have a profitable experience with a customer? And I usually like to look at that based on lifetime value. And, so you look at the lifetime profit on average that you get from a customer, and you know that your advertising needs to come in below that or you failed, and probably a lot below it. Depends on where you're at with your growth plans. Are you funded with venture capitalist funds and it's just all about purchasing growth? But for the most part, you want to be well under that time profitability. And then I want to build a campaign out with the ability to track results. So if I hire an influencer to promote something, I'm going to make sure that we use some way to track, like a discount code or a link that can tag someone with a cookie. And we want to be able to track every purchase back to that campaign. And then it's about doing some simple math at the end to see how it went. And one of the things I really like to do, usually, when you're first starting something out, it's not going to be enormously profitable the first time you try it. But I like to at least set a benchmark. And maybe the first couple campaigns, it's not profitable. Maybe we have $100 lifetime profit value and we're spending $200 to bring in a customer in the first couple campaigns. Well, if I can measure that and I know that accurately, then I can work that 200 down to 150, and I can work the 150 down to 100 and the 100 down to 50. So I like to at least start somewhere, have really good metrics that you're tracking, and then just start working on improving it over time. And sometimes you find that it works and sometimes you find that it doesn't. Influencer marketing isn't for every kind of business. It's really well suited to the kinds of things that if you're browsing through Instagram, look at the products and services that you see advertised there. And those are the kinds of things that it's probably well suited to. You can't always assume that everybody is advertising as a genius, but it at least gives you an idea. One thing to keep in mind, though, with that is that the algorithms give you ads that they think you're going to be interested in. So there could be a lot of products and services on social media that you're not seeing simply because, you're not looking at that kind of stuff on the internet.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the tough thing here is that what I really like about influencer marketing is you're getting other people to talk about you. And that's, the number one way to think about branding. People trust other people. They trust people they like and know, and probably more than they trust the brand initially. So you're getting that value. I mean, even if you get this down to break even, you got to know that there's other value on the branding side. Some of it you can quantify by looking at your rankings on, let's say you're doing YouTube videos and things like that. So there's some quantifiable things in looking at traffic generation from those. And some of them, maybe not really quantifiable, but maybe you're getting digital assets that's helping you on your Instagram page. And, you'd have to pay for those digital assets. So there's so many things when you think about the value of influencer. It's not just them purchasing a product. That's obviously, if you're in business, you got to make a profit. So you got to start there. And just like Justin said, the main question is, what's your cost of acquisition? So that's your starting point. And then when you're looking at an influencer, what are the key metrics? Obviously going to be followers and all of that, but is it mainly based around engagement, or is there something else you look at?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, influencer marketing is great for branding, and you're absolutely right. There are times when you want to invest in a brand and you're not going to see that immediate sales correlation. And like you said, you start with long-term planning and you think about what are these objectives that we want to accomplish. If it's increasing your brand, then you could start to look at that. And sometimes you have to make some subjective decisions, like what is a like on a post worth in terms of brand engagement or brand education? And how could you compare that to, say, sponsoring a booth at a fair and having somebody walk up and talk to you? So there needs to be some kind of subjective analysis done that assigns values to these various things. But yeah, then once you're getting into it and you're looking at those metrics, yeah, there's a ton of things that you can look at: shares, you can look at likes, you can look at views, and each of those has some kind of monetary value as well as monetary costs. And as long as you're keeping really good track of everything, to me, sometimes it's like you don't really know exactly what those things are worth, but you can, if you track it well, you can work to improve it. And so if you start with a benchmark of, hey, we're doing this kind of post, it's costing this much to promote this through this influencer, and we're getting X amount of engagement, then you set that benchmark up just like we talked about with cost of acquisition. And if that's your primary thing is engagement to improve brand recognition, then you're just going to start working on reducing the cost of a like or cost of a share. In terms of virality, shares is everything, right? We're all in this COVID world now, and we understand that we can pass something to someone and get them sick, or they can pass something to us and get us sick. But ideas transfer like viruses too. Ideas are transfer between one person and another person. Every single idea is shared from one person to another person. And so when a product is going viral, it means, like, I don't know if maybe your audience, if you have studied this, I think it's called the R naught of a virus.
We actually had a virologist on.
People, so. Okay, cool. So like the R naught of COVID right now, I think is 1.1, let's say. I don't know that. Don't quote me on it.
Yeah,
but that means that one person is passing on an average to 1.1 people. If you get a positive R naught, you have a virus that's expanding. And that's what you want with products or a social media post. For every person that sees it, you want them to share it in such a way that more than one person sees it as a result of that share. When that happens, you have a viral post. And it's going to continue to expand an audience until it sort of peters out and people are sharing it less often than people are getting to see it. So to me, that one is a real magic one that I like to look at because it's the golden rule when it comes to creating viral content, which is, of course, one of the best things. It's like winning the lottery online. You post something and you can get millions upon millions of views because you created something that people want to share.
Yeah. And that's a great explanation. You had a couple of great quotes in there too. And the one I wrote down was shares are everything. And then you kind of went into, the relationship of, why that actually matters. And which is, it all makes sense and it's all common sense, but I guess we don't think about that, when everybody makes their campaigns, or not everybody thinks about that. And I guess it goes back to your point of why you have to have somebody that's really passionate about this, because they have to, it's a very kind of artful process, but they also have to be so analytical and follow all the numbers. And it really takes that passionate person who is artful, but also is going to be diligent about tracking the numbers and making sure that these things have an ROI. And I guess the next thing is...
Yeah, you really kind of need two people in that role, because the person who's really good at social media isn't usually the person that's really good at tracking everything. To me, the person that understands social media the best is somebody that is like a social butterfly online. They love sharing their life. They love checking in with people. And they're going to understand the language and how to speak fluently online, and they're going to understand authenticity. So the biggest mistake a lot of people make is it's not authentic. And authenticity is what separates social media from advertising. With advertising, we have famous people telling us to buy products, but there's no authenticity because we know that they just got paid to do it. Whereas on social media, we follow these people, we think they're our friends. Like psychologically speaking, our brain considers these people that we follow in a similar way as we consider our close personal friends. And our brain gets tricked into thinking that they are our friends. And so when they say, I love buying this product, and we trust that they're actually saying what they do and not just doing it to get paid, that's why it's like a friend's recommendation. So again, maybe I'm getting into too many details here, but the idea is that people authentically either get this all or they don't. And then you have another kind of person who understands how important it is to track numbers. If you can find that in one person, pay that person whatever they need.
There you go. I actually like talking about that stuff because, listen, business owners, we all thinking about in terms of org charts and putting departments together. So I think that is important to go over right there. Is you're going to need two people. And for those of you that have an e-com department, you probably already have that technical person, hopefully, because, if you're running a website, you're already going to be using Google Analytics and other tracking features that are needed to be successful. What I liked about what you just said right there, just to quickly repeat another good quote is, authenticity separates social media from advertising. So I thought That's great. It just paints that picture of why what we're talking about today is so important. And business owners, always think about deals. How is a deal set up? So Justin, let's break this down, because something for you that just may be second nature, I think it is, for me, when I want to understand something, I got to write it down. Okay, this is this side of the equation and this is the other side of the equation. What is each party getting? So let's talk about this deal on social media. I have some experience doing this. So when we're looking at it and you're looking, okay, how big of an influencer or not big of an influencer, and then you're looking at the value of maybe the product you're giving or the payment. And there's a lot of things they could do for you. You could run giveaways. They could do a post just maybe on Instagram. Maybe they have other channels they can post on, and they can make a story. Can you kind of, walk us through what a deal structure might look like and maybe some options that the listeners can think about?
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, you're right. There are a lot of ways to structure a deal. And one way is that you don't have to pay anything necessarily. Sometimes you can just offer free product to an influencer. And this is becoming more and more common as influencers become smaller and smaller in terms of the ones that brands are willing to go after. They have different categories that we call, under 3,000 followers, a nano influencer. So if you have 2,500 followers on Instagram, you could be considered a nano influencer. And obviously at that small level of followership, it's unlikely that someone's going to offer you $1,000 to post a story on your Instagram feed. But hey, we'll give you go into Warby Parker and pick out any glasses you want. And then all we ask is that you do 3 stories about it. And maybe you film your shopping experience. Maybe you ask your, like in that case, you could post photos of you with 2 or 3 different Warby Parker glasses on and ask your audience which one they like best. And you just mention, and you can kind of work in, by the way, I'm at Warby Parker and they're having a sale. Just always remember that you have to disclose that it's an ad when there's any kind of financial interchange happening. Even if you're offering free product, you need to denote that it's an ad. That's FTC compliance. So from everything from, or even just asking people to help you. I've got this book coming out and I'm hitting up everybody that helped me with the book. I'm hitting up my friends and I'm trying to make it as easy as possible. I send them pictures. I say, hey, if you're up for posting this, I'd love it. And you just ask. So sometimes it's just that. Sometimes it's offering free product. And then, of course, you can pay for just about anything. One of the cool things about influencer marketing is it's very open-ended. It can be anything that you can imagine. All it is it's people on social media talking about stuff. You can have somebody come in and do a little tour of your shop, or, you can send your products and people can do unboxing videos and talk about it. Of course, it gets really widely varied as you start thinking about how each different product or service would be marketed through social media. But it helps if you just kind of think about it as people talking about stuff. And so how can you authentically get someone talking about your stuff? And then you approach the person and you talk about what are they looking for? Sometimes it's not money. Sometimes they love to get a free trip, or maybe there's something that you can give them that costs you less money than it's worth to them. All of these things are on the table. Like maybe you have some free flight vouchers from a flight you had to cancel and you can't use them, so you can offer those to somebody. And so you just kind of, it's as widely varied as you can imagine. But I do think, one thing that's important there is it's not so much about blasting out to hundreds of different influencers and trying to get one of them to take your deal. It's more like building a relationship with a single influencer and working with that person over time. Because just like authenticity is important on social media in terms of what messaging you put out there, social media is still, it's about authentic relationships, including the relationship between the influencer and the brand. That needs to be authentic too. It doesn't have to be. It's just a lot more successful if it is authentic. And you can begin to build a relationship with an influencer if you pick the right people who are really mobile. Well, after a few years, they might be 100 times bigger than when you met them, but they're going to be willing to work with you in a lot more ways because you were helping them, and you were there with them as they were growing. So I think that that's a really important thing to remember is it's not so much about a single deal. I never try to think about influencer marketing as a single exchange. I'm trying to find people that I want to work with for a long period of time. And so then it's, it kind of changes the equation and there's more flexibility depending on the size of your organization to give a little bit more in the beginning and really try to secure some trust and a relationship with someone that you're going to be able to lean on that relationship over time as that develops.
Yeah, I think it's such an important point. And everybody running a sales department is going to understand this. Customer acquisition is expensive, and selling again to that same customer is a lot cheaper, right? You're in so many
Right.
different levels. So this is the same thing.
Mhm.
And it's great that you brought that up, Justin. We do the same thing here. And actually we created a metric internally that we have to hit a certain percentage of repeat engagements, for all the reasons, because it's one thing to say it and it's another thing to track it, just like all the other items you mentioned to track. And now we're starting to track that as one of our key metrics of which percentage of total engagements are repeat engagements. And you laid out all the reasons. So I think it's a great point. Moving on so we talked about kind of like the deal structure and all the reasons. Do you have any preferred platforms that you've worked with? So say a business is now, okay, they get why it's valuable. They understand how to set up a deal. Now they got to go find influencers. Obviously they can just, go on social media themselves or have somebody on the team do it. But then there is an advantage to platforms because they can, create the communication back and forth, the CRM part of it. And they can also kind of give you scorecards on like how valuable an influencer might be. Any thoughts or comments on that side?
Mm-hmm. In terms of the most popular networks for influencer marketing, Instagram and YouTube are clear favorites. Pinterest drives a ton of traffic, so it's in the mix. Even if people don't have a lot of followers, it's one of the best for driving clicks. And LinkedIn is emerging as a really successful network for B2B transactions and recruiting. And you can find people that have large groups that they administer, or some people just have a lot of followers there, and so they have some influence there. But some of it depends on the product and service. Instagram is great for visually oriented products. But these things also change fairly rapidly. We mentioned TikTok. That is emerging really quickly as a huge influencer marketplace. A lot of people are advertising clothes and kind of the same things that you're seeing on Instagram, but it's moving over to TikTok. And so, these things are constantly morphing and changing, which is why, again, you want to have someone that really understands and lives and breathes this, because to them it's second nature. They say, "Oh, no, don't post that there. We got to put that on Instagram, not on Twitter," or just something as simple as the frequency of posting. You can post a lot more on some networks than others, and you might annoy your customers in one place, and they might enjoy it in another. The same exact behavior.
Yeah, but what about? And I definitely want to get back to Instagram versus YouTube on the next question. But what about any platforms like software platforms that help businesses aggregate the influencers? They kind of do the work of finding the influencers. Do you have any experience or thoughts on that end of?
In terms of finding influencers.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely, there's agencies, there's tools that you can use online. There's hundreds of tools. You can do a quick Google search for verifying whether an influencer's, following is legitimate or not. And people can scan for ScanBot. These things often change quickly too, because the networks themselves are often changing their policies, and sometimes they allow other databases a lot more access to their data that they can analyze, and then sometimes they'll turn it off and you can no longer use that service anymore. But I think that the best way to find people to work with is the slow way, which is just talking to people, engaging with people. Again, not to keep harping on this, but if you have someone that is doing this every day because they enjoy it, they're going to know some people probably off the top of their head that they've been following. And they're going to have some real famous people that they follow. They're going to have some smaller people. And they might be like, "Oh yeah, I know 3 or 4 people that have under 100,000 followers that, I've shared a few comments back and forth." And when you're reaching out to that person and they kind of recognize your name because you've been commenting on their posts for the last 6 months, then that's a much easier in with that influencer. Because again, it's about community. A lot of people forget that humans are still human. We want to have interpersonal connections with other human beings. It's the same that we've been wanting for the last 100,000 years. Just now we have a different technology to do it through. It's like the invention of the telephone. The invention of the telephone didn't change the way that humans want to create interaction with each other. It's just changed the medium through which we interact. And so when people try to approach social media like a computer would, then they're going to get bad results. That's why spamming, you send the same message to 5,000 influencers, it's never going to work, because they can sniff it out and they don't have any part of that. And so it's much better to have organic relationships that are built And trust takes some time, which is why having a little bit of longevity with some people is good. And then if nothing else, there's hashtags. So hashtag searching is by far one of the most popular ways of finding people. So check out the hashtags that would be in posts related to your products. See, is there anybody promoting, your competitors' products, or is anybody, if you're lucky enough to have people talking about your products already, that should be something that you're definitely looking into and tracking. And one of the best ways, again, to find influencers is if somebody posts about your product. Maybe let's use me as an example. I'm an author. And let's say somebody on Instagram posts about my book and promotes it and says, I just read this book, really love it. You guys should check it out. And I see that come up because I'm tracking that, that content. And then I might reach out to that person and be like, hey, thank you so much. That's wonderful. How would you feel about doing a few more of these posts? And I'll pay you $250. Or that can be really, really one of the best ways, because then that influencer can even tell that story and say, I love this book. I was talking about it. And the author saw that and reached out to me. And then we, created a partnership. And now I'm a brand ambassador for this author. And that sounds authentic and it sounds exciting. And the audience gets it. They don't distrust it because it makes sense. And so all of those things add up to make a much, much more successful campaign than this more computerized, sterile approach that people are tempted to use because it's on a computer, so it makes sense. We kind of think it's a sterile thing, but it's not. It's just people talking to people.
Yeah, and that's super helpful. And I think the key thing there was find the right influencers, build actual real human engagements there with these people, because really that's how the process works. Like I said, we do it here at New Era, and you're always looking for things to speed it up and software to help. But at the end of the day, you're still communicating with an individual, and there has to be, an agreement. You have to come to terms on certain things and hopefully have fun with it and re-engage with that person. And so I think that's great advice. And quickly, before we finish up here, do you have I'd love to hear your take on YouTube versus Instagram, what you see each one better for. Personally, I do like YouTube because, I'm old school and I like SEO, and I'm like, okay, these videos stay around forever, versus Instagram just like disappears in a couple of days. But I could be, short-sighted on something. So I'd love to hear if you have a different opinion on that.
I think that they're just different for different things. And, a lot of bloggers have some of the greatest strength of relationship with their audience. They just shoot videos. For those in the audience that don't know, a blogger is just someone who does frequent video posts, and it's usually just about their daily life. And many of these people, they started when they were 13 years old, and they just had a camera phone, and they were just in their bedroom, and they were just charismatic young people, and they gained a following, and they would just talk about stuff, like it could be anything. So they have a very high level of trust and engagement because of the psychological principle we talked about earlier. People actually think that subconsciously they feel that these people are their friends. So when they recommend a product, they don't have to try hard. It's like your best friend saying, you should try this makeup brand, or, I started buying this makeup brand. You want to buy it because your best friend bought it. So I think that you're right. YouTube is a fantastic place. They also have by far the best metrics because they are owned by YouTube, and YouTube they're owned by Google, and Google has Google Analytics, which is really nicely tied in with YouTube. Instagram gives you almost nothing. It's like this very polished up consumer level information. Instagram can give you a lot better metrics if you go into Facebook and create an ad manager account. And you can look at a lot more in there, but you have to do that through a computer, not accessible through the app. But Instagram, in its own right, has launched a billion-dollar brand. And Instagram is about the look. And so if a beautiful picture, like when you see a lot of consumer products that are made for good design, do very well on Instagram. And that's a harder thing to do on YouTube. Business to business, or if you're a coach, there's a lot of reasons to do videos on YouTube. And so I would just say, I don't think that one or the other is better. I think it comes down to what you're trying to do based on either what the product or service is, or what is the kind of method of delivery. Do you want to do a video, or does pictures work better? It's kind of what it comes down to.
Yeah, it's great. And then, brands can try both. And you laid out some great reasons to work on both sides. And of course, you're going to cover a big audience that way. So, wow, listen, I think we got through all the topics here, start to finish, on influencer marketing, and really hope that the audience that you all got some good tips and that you give it a shot and try this and turn some of your branding budget and marketing budget into an influencer marketing budget if you're not doing that already. And listen, Justin, I really appreciate you're super thoughtful and I can hear the professor in you. So thanks so much for being a guest. And yeah, how can listeners, find more about you and learn more from you?
Oh, thanks for asking. Yeah, well, my name is Justin Blaney. I'm sure you'll have the link somewhere in the show, or at least you can just Google me, and I'm on most of the social networks. I share a lot of motivational content on Instagram, and I have an app as well that contains a lot of motivational content, which is basically what I call like 2,500 years of wisdom that I've tried to distill down for the modern age. So that's a special project to me. I don't make any money on any of that stuff. It's just kind of like something I like to do as a way to kind of give to the universe more than I'm taking, I hope. But this book that's coming out is real top of mind. I've been on some other podcasts talking about it, and I saw this hole in the marketplace where businesses didn't really have any tools to get started. Something that's really simple and accessible. It's a short book, 200 pages, and I have a co-author that helped put it together. She's a really great Instagrammer that does skincare information. And we put like a whole marketing plan in there. We have templates, contracts, ideas. We have really what we try to do is start to finish. This is everything you need to know, create a successful influencer marketing campaign. So that's coming out, like I said, and that can be ordered on Amazon, or you can go to willpostforprofit.com/Amazon, and that'll take you straight to the pre-order page. And actually, we're doing a little limited time special for anybody that pre-orders it. We're creating a workbook and a few other companion materials that we're going to give away for free. So if anybody wants to take advantage of that, you can learn more at willpostforprofit.com.
That's great. And we'll also have all these links in the notes on the podcast page on retailband.com. So we'll make sure all the links are in there. And again, Justin, just want to thank you for being an outstanding guest. I learned a lot and really enjoyed the conversation. And also want to thank everybody for listening to this episode of the Page One podcast sponsored by Retail Band. Check us out at retailband.com if your business needs a blueprint on how to succeed digitally. And also appreciate all the reviews on iTunes and hope you all join us for the next interview.
Thanks for listening to the Page One podcast with Luke Peters. If you enjoyed this episode, please help us out by leaving us a rating on iTunes. Want to double your online sales? Check out www.retailband.com. And don't forget to join us next week with our next amazing guest.